Hello YouTube, Justin Merrill here. Sorry my marathon's running a little bit behind. My health has still been poor, and more significantly, the first video I'm making is just so chock full of information. I've really been researching a lot, so I'm really going to make it and try to make it a high quality video. So in the sake of making a video so high quality that it will stand on its own and hopefully get a lot of distribution because of it. So I'm still working on my first video only, but it will be the most detailed of the 6 videos I'll be making. In fact, it's so chock full of information. I was originally going to cover or have it a 3-part video within one video, but I think I'm going to split it up so that the first part is in this video here. I was originally going to discuss in one video the dialogue I had with the person who got me started on making this video, because inspired me to prove how fallacious his arguments were. We covered a lot of topics, not just, is primarily focused on free trade, and but we covered some other topics, and I think that the arguments I made there stand up, by themselves. But so I think I will use this video as a primer and show the context of where this discussion came from. So also it'll be more relevant to keep the other parts of the topic as one video, whereas this video will cover other different topics, and the next video will be more academic, whereas this one is more just a philosophical discourse.
So I copy and paste all the comments from our discussion, and I move them over to my webpage, and so I put them in chronological order, because sometimes YouTube has a habit of rearranging the comments, and a lot of conversations don't make sense if they're out of order. So on this YouTube page, which I have also included the link, so if you want to see the original comments, this is Louis the Greater asks, how can you outsource 52,000 manufacturing facilities and not have massive unemployment? Jobs are not coming back until we add tariffs on third world consumer goods. It's as simple as that, if you believe the data. Wow. And I replied, our trade deficit has little to do with free trade and a lot to do with costly regulations that make us non-competitive. Protectionism would just make us all poor. Say we jack up tariffs on Asian textiles and electronics. That would lead to a concomitant decrease in their ability to buy the things we do export, like agriculture. If they stop selling stuff to us, then they no longer have the US dollars to buy things back from us that we do make. Get it? So he replies, so living wages, clean environment, worker safety, labor unions, 40-hour work week are all hindrances to investment. Is that what you were saying? You believe American society is here to supply corporations with labor, consumers, and infrastructure so investors can make big bucks. 80% of all new income since 2005 has gone to 1% of the population. That is a result of American investment in Asia. So I reply, present consumption in any form, whether it's environmentalism or worker safety or reducing the amount of hours you work. I'm not saying those things are inherently bad. I'm just acknowledging that they are a form of consumption. Things that he's citing, like labor unions and a 40-hour work week, are a result of the labor movement, which is a socialist movement. There's no doubting that. I'm just saying this for future reference, where he will deny being a socialist. and his rhetoric about American society being here to supply corporations with labor, consumers, blah blah blah, so investors can make the big bucks. So again, that's against the capitalist structure that he's ranting. And this unfounded claim of 80% of all new income since 2005 going to 1% of the population, again, you can just tell by the rhetoric his viewpoint, right? And also his claim that the result of American investment in Asia instead of our own country is the reason we no longer have manufacturing. First of all, there is, between Asia and America, there is net investment in America of a very high scale. Asia invests in us much more than America invests in Asia. So he is way off there. Present consumption in any form results in a decline in future production. The fact that an average man lives longer, works less, and has more amenities is evidence of the benefits of capitalism, because productivity is raised to the point that one can afford the consumption. Also, of the returns on factors of production, land, and capital have historically flat returns, but the returns of wages has risen dramatically because as capital accumulates, labor becomes more productive. Keep that in mind, because I will address that in my next 2 videos. And I go on to say, oh, one more thing, because this really irks me about people with your worldview. You advocate a social utilitarian philosophy when it is convenient for you, wealth distribution, regulations, etc., but then turn around and advocate narrow protectionist intervention to fend off foreign imports. So that makes you a nationalist and a socialist. Nationalist plus socialist equals Nazi. Think about it. Now let me go on to explain what I just said, so there's no confusion. When he's talking about wealth distribution, complaining about all the wealth going to the top 1%, and thinking that all of the 40-hour work week and everything, that's all socialist ideals right there. And you can tell that he's complaining that the average person is getting screwed out of the situation, and we need interventionism, which comes from the government, to make things more socially just or economically just. That is, without a doubt, a socialist idea. I'm just trying to, let's be honest here. Let's be honest with ourselves. That's what I should say. And if that is their true ideology, in a certain way, I can respect that, because if they truly believe that we should approach things to maximize happiness and well-being for everyone, every action should be done with a utilitarian point of view. How can we maximize the well-being of everyone? Even if it's not the best thing for me, I might give up $100 of my paycheck that I would have spent on some frivolous thing and give it to someone who utterly needs it for survival or whatever. If that is the ideology, I can understand that and respect it to a degree. I disagree with the implementation of it, but if someone is true to that ideology, I don't have it as big of a problem with it. But when they say that this utilitarian philosophy should be applied, but only to a certain group of people within a certain imaginary border, I have a hard time with that one. Saying we basically should only worry about the people in America at the expense of everyone else in the world. And I'm not talking about through inaction. I'm not saying how evil it is that we don't force Americans to give 10% of their paycheck to welfare of third world countries. I'm not saying that it's the inaction of doing something. I'm saying he advocates interventionism. I'm just trying to explain that he advocates a social utilitarian philosophy when it's convenient for him, when he would be the net beneficiary of the intervention. Then he turns around and advocates narrow protectionist intervention to fend off foreign imports, which presumably would reduce the living standard of people we are importing the goods from, right? So he's more concerned only about people within our imaginary boundary lines called United States of America, where even if you're living at the poverty level in America, you're living many multiples of a greater quality of existence than someone in the countries he's saying that we should intervene against, so that we can, or protect ourselves against, is how someone would word it. So he replies, after I accuse him of his ideology, whether he understands it or not, being a socialist and a nationalist is what the Nazi philosophy was. And I'm not saying he automatically is okay with the Holocaust, or I'm not making that accusation. I'm just saying how a lot of people who don't think about the outcomes of their philosophy, or how closely rooted it is to other regimes which have led to genocides. So he replies to me, "You believe the founders of the Constitution were National Socialists." First of all, I never said that. I never even mentioned the founders up to this point. I clearly said in the sentence before, so that makes you a Nationalist Socialist, not our founders. And he goes on to say, they were all America First protectionist. Speaking of wealth redistribution, you must really be objective to the American middle class's wealth being redistributed. Okay, well, sorry for the pun, but yes, I am very objective about it. I know that's just a grammar error. He means I must object to it. But as you will see in my next video, I'm very objective about the outcomes of free trade. It's on to say that I consider myself an American who believes the founders intended protectionist capitalism instead of the new global laissez-faire capitalism, which will only bring the U.S. to her knees. You think about that. So even though in his earlier comments he went on to mention how proud he is of the labor unions and the 40-hour work week and the evil investors and the wealthiest getting the majority of the income, he calls himself a capitalist. So obviously he doesn't understand his contradictions there. So I reply, it's pretty hard to qualify the founders as socialists. The word welfare only shows up once in the Constitution, and they weren't referring to food stamps. There were high tariffs at the time, but that was because duties were the major source of funding the federal government, along with alcohol tax. I go on to say, there was no income tax or IRS back then, and the government, of course, was smaller. Note that duties on trade between states was forbidden in the Constitution. It's been a fun debate, thanks. I thought he would have given up there. But he comes back and says to me, the high tariffs at the time was to protect American industry and labor from slave societies. American industry could not compete with foreign wage slaves and British colonialized slavery. Okay, I didn't even address that one because America at the time had probably the one of the greatest amounts of slave labor, which I'll actually address in another video sometime after I do a little bit more research. But from the research I found, the productivity of slave labor is much lower and costlier than a person who freely associates with their employer. Tariffs were an essential part of the American economy until the late 1960s, when the globalist one-worlders gained control of Washington and our colleges and universities. Duties between the states is far different from duties between 57 cents an hour wage economies and our own. So I reply, in regards to your claim that founders were nationalists, if you read James Madison from the Federalist Papers, the new Constitution will, if established, be a federal and not a national constitution, and the state governments may be regarded as constituent and essential parts of the federal government, whilst the latter is nowise essential to the operation or organization of the former. So, in short, the states are the primary, and the federal government is the secondary. The states can exist without the federal government, and not so the other way. It's not a national government, unlike other countries where the central power is at the top and national level. Really, the federal government is there just to handle the states. He replies to me, you said the founders were National Socialists. I never said that. I called him a National Socialist. That's twice now that he's been confused. I said they were America First protectionist. The alternative is a one-world globalist. You have a complete misunderstanding of the Federalist Papers. Is it possible that you could actually believe that Madison was a globalist who at any moment would have traded his American status for a global one? Wow, what a stretch of the Federalist Papers. Newt himself would not have gone that far, even though he is an advocate of globalization. At this point, it's getting a little silly, so I said, I never said the founders were National Socialists. I said your view is. The misperception that free trade impoverishes us leads to conquest, like Japan and Nazis in World War II. Not only does it destroy the international division of labor, it leads to lives lost in grandiose military conflicts. How do you interpret my post about the Federalist Papers as advocation of some one world government? James Madison didn't trust the federal government to have free rule, let alone some world government. And he replies, I believe you did not read my post if you believe I am a socialist. Okay, remember, he is talking about the labor unions and the 40-hour work week, and also he has an anti-capitalist mentality, whether he likes to admit it or not, towards investors. And he's focusing more on the workers' rights perspective, or economic justice. So he's a socialist with his ideas, but he doesn't even notice. But anyways, he says he admits he's a nationalist. Socialist, no. I believe the founders were nationalists in the sense that they considered the prosperity and well-being of their own countrymen first. I don't understand how you read my post about the Federalist Papers. I did not associate that statement in your worldview. The Federalist Papers were simply a means of getting the Constitution ratified. We know the states' rights have been upheld. And he goes on to say, I understand your inability to understand the world around you. Laissez-faire free trade is the vehicle that globalization is riding on. Free trade is designed to lower the wages of Americans and reward multinationals with 400% profits. Sounds like you are perfectly willing to create an industrial utopia while creating universal abundance of wage slaves. I must ask, do you really believe that you are one of the global elitists, or are you a chicken rooting for Colonel Sanders? And he goes on to say, I believe you have a very narrow-minded interpretation of nationalism, probably derived from your pro-globalization philosophy. Would you be happy to trade in your American citizenship for a global one? So at this point, he's really sounding like a crazy conspiracy theorist in terms of what globalization means. And it's economic ignorance is shining. He obviously hasn't read anything from Adam Smith or Hume or any Econ 101. So I reply to his question, would you be happy to trade in your American citizenship for a global one? When in terms of free trade. I said, yeah. I just bought some maple syrup from Canada, a 3D TV and PlayStation from Japan, a Glock handgun from Austria, and my clothes are made in China. I guess I'd better get started on filling out my immigration forms for all those countries and denounce my citizenship. His idea that we're better off by producing everything we need within a country, which is the nationalist point of view, is very dangerous. One, it impoverishes you because you destroy the division of labor, and which also includes resource. I mean, some things can't be made in America. Some things are indigenous to a certain area, and some people are better off making something than we are, and vice versa. So we are all better off from trade. But the scary thing about the nationalist point of view is that it leads to war and conquest, because if you have the idea that everything must be created within your borders, or you're better off in that situation, and when it comes to a point where there are not enough of the resources that you need to be self-sufficient, that leads to a desire to expand your borders, which means taking over your neighbors or locations that have the desired resources. So this is why nationalism not only is economically far from ideal, but it creates a dangerous mindset that leads to war. And so he replies, sounds like you are eager to trade in your American citizenship for a global one. That is neither a nationalist or a federalist. That is a globalist. You should be aware of that all those products, meaning the ones that I said I bought from different countries, once provided jobs for Americans. Now we have 50% of the workforce that does not even reach the income threshold to pay federal taxes. Well, that right there is not a problem with the incomes of the middle class. It's more of a problem with our tax code, but that's a different story. Now those 52,000 manufacturing facilities that once provided jobs for Americans are now being performed by subsistence wages. Oh, he meant performed by subsistence wage earners in the third world, and multinationals are earning enormous profits. You are unaware that free trade cannot exist in the environment of nation states, aren't you? And he also talks like there's no benefit of the cheaper goods that we import. I mean, have you ever gone to Walmart? Most things are from China, and it's a lot cheaper to buy a lot of the stuff there than other places. So there is some benefit. I mean, to ignore that there is some benefit, no matter what your point of view is, uh, that's kind of ridiculous. But I reply one last thing, one last comment. I say, I think I understand your confusion. You can't tell the difference between global trade and global government. There is a huge difference between the free exchange of commerce between consenting parties without distortions and supra-sovereign institutions or governments that aren't elected but draft binding treaties like the Kyoto Protocol and UN weapons bans, etc. So this is a point of view I see amongst a lot of conservative people or a lot of people on the internet. Actually, it's not even just conservatives. It's a lot of people on the left too. A lot of the left people who are call themselves pro-labor are for tariffs, and a lot of people on the right who would consider themselves pro-business are for protectionism. And I really, this is one issue that I feel very strongly about, and I really hope that we can educate the public on the benefits of free trade. And I hope my next video helps to do that. Thank you.